Tony Khan is a great pacifist, but a terrible president and CEO as AEW's locker room continues to be a breeding ground for beef. Half of AEW's roster seems to be fighting backstage, and of the talent who don't get into backstage altercations these days, chances are it's because they were already sent home by Tony Khan months ago, like Ricky Starks, and until recently, Sammy Guevara, who was fighting backstage before being suspended. Yes, Britt Baker got suspended just like Sammy, and there was all this drama with MJF and his girlfriend Alicia Atout, and apparently MJF punched the wall, and we'll get into that, but it's all beside the point, because even as top stars, everybody involved in AEW's latest backstage drama between Britt Baker and MJF are interchangeable, because it's all a reflection on Tony Khan's management style. Britt Baker versus MJF was yet another situation that was described as something AEW should have handled a while ago, but Tony Khan seems too traumatized by confrontation to be effective in that role. I say this all the time. Tony Khan is Tod Gordon, and he desperately needs to find his Paul Heyman, a real leader whom wrestlers actually respect and is not just a talking checkbook. Because just because you're a superfan with a bank account doesn't mean you have authority. Tony Khan can buy every former WWE star as part of an ongoing addiction to free agency, but money can't buy respect. Money can't buy authority. And no amount of money will solve backstage fights among talent, something that seems to happen all the time in AEW, especially around All-In season. AEW feels like if a fantasy booker on Twitter spent his allowance on a wrestling company. Despite being surrounded by some of the greatest wrestling minds in history, Khan is searching the bottom of Twitter to hire assistants. I think it's so Tony Khan can be surrounded by other people with no aura or authority so that he could feel like more of a boss. Apparently some podcaster who Tony hired tried to give Britt Baker creative direction, and she said, "That don't work for me, brother." Hilarious. Because if you're a podcaster trying to give creative advice to Britt bleeping Baker, you must be living in a sweet, sweet fantasy, dog. God, being an assistant to Tony Khan is the worst job description. How do you even assist somebody with no authority to speak of? Is that even a real job? It's like being Secretary of Defense for Switzerland, or a 7th grader being put in charge of their parents' divorce proceedings. Pretty soon, after all these talented wrestlers continue to leave AEW like Cody, Jade, and Ethan Page, among many others, Tony's whole staff will start to look like a comment section. Fuck it, at this point, just bring in Bix, Alvarez, Meltzer, and the rest of the Wrestling Observer message board he caters to. Just turn AEW into the incel melting pot it was meant to be from day one. Because to quote Phil Brooks, AEW is not a real business. Tony Khan promised to revolutionize the wrestling business, and to his credit, he did, because AEW is the only company I can think of where the backstage drama is more cinematic than the wrestling. You gotta think a little to tell me the main event for AEW All In and All Out. Nobody has a problem telling you the main event for the Brawl In and the Brawl Out. Tony Khan handles conflict the way I handle jury duty, where you put it off for weeks until the Friday before, and then you realize that you forgot to call in to postpone, but by the time you do call in, it's too late, so now I have to show up to the LA Superior Courthouse on Monday? Well, just think of the LA Superior Courthouse as the AEW Disciplinary Committee. I just love how Tony Khan has had all these backstage problems in AEW that got made worse by online tribalism. Yet his solution was to hire tribal fans straight from social media, and now they're the source of even more problems. Don't believe me? Just ask Devon Dudley.
Someone who I admire very well in this business that works for AEW is Swerve. Great guy, but I do know that his cousin, I think it is, who's a dirt sheet writer, who basically is in Tony's ear a lot. As far as I'm concerned, from my understanding, from people in the locker room, the 3 times I was there in the meetings, every single person said he's a snake. And they don't know why Tony Khan is trusting him.
Let's do a quick scorecard of top AEW talent and their current status with the company. MJF just returned as a babyface, turned heel, and now he's pissed off after an incident with Britt Baker. Sammy Guevara reportedly didn't like AEW's creative direction for him, so they had him return to ROH. This is a pillar. You cannot tell me this wasn't a punishment. By the way, how much does it suck to be an AEW pillar right now? Sammy was suspended again. Jack Perry was suspended, stemming from the Brawl Out. We've got all this MJF drama going on right now. And Darby Allin, the only pillar left standing, won't be able to stand anymore if he keeps taking bumps like this. This feels like more of a house of cards than a bunch of pillars. Even outside the pillarship, Ricky Starks seems to have both feet out the door. Just look at him ruthlessly troll MJF about the Britt Baker situation. Wardlow been frustrated, and instead of worrying about placating his disgruntled talent, Tony Khan is trying to solve his problems by throwing money at one free agent after another. Shane McMahon, Bobby Lashley, and Ricochet will probably be here by the end of the summer, and I promise you, they'll be just as frustrated with AEW's podcasting creative by this time during All In next season. Assuming there even is an All In next year, because WWE's finna kill all that with WrestleMania London. More on that too. Now that the new car smell has worn off this Jaguar, AEW will only go as far as Tony Khan can lead them. And the scary thing is, Tony Khan can't lead. Tony lacks the ability to say no, so every big star he signs or re-signs gets their own personal perks. Luther was brought in as a favor to Jericho. Alicia Atout has been a talented broadcaster, but she was brought in as a favor to MJF. Jen Pepperman is Mercedes Monet's own personal writer. When you start giving contracts to the entourage, it fractures the locker room and creates a gang mentality where everybody is out for themselves. Similar to how Ace Steel was brought in to appease CM Punk, and look how that turned out. Tony Khan's philosophy when it comes to staffing a wrestling company is nepotism and cronyism over carnyism. If AEW signs Ricochet, Justin Roberts better pull a Tony Khan and fear for his life, because Samantha Irvin won't be too far behind. Check out this video and subscribe. Is Tony Khan the worst boss ever? Tell me in the comments!